In this video we are going to discuss how to invert seventh chords. Inverting seventh chords is pretty much the same as inverting triads. The same rules apply. The only difference is because a seventh chord has one additional note, there's one additional possible inversion. So if the root is in the bass of the bass, you have a root position seventh chord, just like triads. If the third is in the bass, you are in first inversion, that is the same. If the fifth is in the bass, it is second inversion, that's the same. And here's the difference. You can have the seventh in the bass, and that is the third inversion. Any member of the seventh chord, just like a triad, may be doubled without affecting the quality of the chord. And actually, you will occasionally find that members of the seventh chord will also be left out on occasion. The notes above the bass may be arranged in any way, and that will not affect what the quality of the seventh chord is, and it won't affect what the inversion of the seventh chord is. It is only the lowest note that determines what the inversion is, just the same as with triads. So if you are trying to determine the quality of a seventh chord, you want to rearrange the notes until you have a root position, closed position chord, and in this case a seventh chord, and then you can tell, here's the root, and look at the quality of the rest of it. This is also going to be an important thing to think about when you have mixed chords and you don't know whether you have a triad or a seventh chord, which will be coming up, that if you make sure every note that you're looking at is accounted for, rearrange it in root position, stacked thirds, you can clearly see what kind of chord you have. Just like with triads, seventh chords are labeled with figured bass numerals, which are derived from the distance of chord members from the bass note. So in a root position seventh chord, from the bass to the top is a seventh, from the bass to the upper middle note is a fifth, and from the bass to the lower middle is a third. So the figured bass notation for a root position seventh chord in its entirety is 7-5-3, but again, just as with triads, we don't always use the entire figure. So for a root position seventh chord, it is abbreviated to just 7. So this chord would be a C major 7, or if we actually are in the key of C, as the key signature might indicate, it would be a 1-7. A first inversion seventh chord, the distance from the bass to the top is a sixth, and notice as this is written on the staff that the B and the C are placed very close to each other, next to each other, not overlapping. That would be way too difficult to read. So this is the appropriate way. It doesn't really matter which side you write the C on. You could write it on either side, but they should be next to each other. And if they're almost touching, that is what's going to indicate that they are meant to be played at the same time. The distance from the bass to the upper middle note is, then this arrow could be a little more distinct, a fifth, and the distance to the lower middle is a third. So for a first inversion seventh chord, the figure in its entirety is 6-5-3. This is commonly abbreviated to just 6-5. And the reasoning for this is one unique quality of an inverted seventh chord is the second that happens between the root and the seventh when you invert it. So the 6 and the 5 are reflecting where that seventh is. So we have a C major 6-5 or a 1-6-5. A second inversion seventh chord, again from the root to the top, is again a sixth, from the root to the upper middle is a fourth, and from the root to the lower middle is a third, and notice this time it is written to the left. Doesn't matter, could be either side. The figured bass for a second inversion seventh chord is 6-4-3, and this one is commonly abbreviated to 4-3. Why? Because it's the fourth and the third above the bass where the second is. So here again, that's the defining characteristic of an inverted seventh chord. And lastly, the third inversion is when you have the seventh in the bass. The distance from the bass note to the top is a sixth. Distance from the bass to the upper middle is a fourth, and the distance to the lower middle is a second. So the figured bass for a third inversion seventh chord is 6-4-2. Now, there are two different ways to abbreviate this. One way is to abbreviate it to 4-2, and sometimes you will just see 2. This is actually the purest way to do it if you are just locating where the second is, because it's right there. But at HSU, the 4-2 designation is the one that is actually preferred. So this is a C major 4-2 or a 1 tonic 4-2.